to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast, presented by Fantasy Data. Here's your hosts, Billy Muzio and Bradley Stalder.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast presented by Fantasy Data. Billy Muzio in the house tonight. Bradley is not going to be able to join us this evening, unfortunately, due to a large power outage in Michigan. 300,000 individuals are without power for the last 24 hours in Michigan. So I will be seeing Bradley tomorrow in Canton, Ohio for the FF Expo. First time meeting in person. We're excited. But nonetheless, tonight we have the man himself on tonight. Jason Moore from the Fantasy Footballers is here in the house with me. He is a top 10 most accurate analyst in 2017, 2018, 2019. I feel like you should be fist bumping right now. That's impressive.
I mean, I should be jumping around, dancing.
And he is one of the co-hosts of the award-winning Fantasy Footballers podcast, I think the number one podcast in the world for fantasy football. It is an honor to have you on. Whenever I look at the gold standard for podcasting, I don't think anyone else can be mentioned other than the footballers. So thank you for joining me and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for the kind words. We enjoy what we do, and we're grateful that our audience enjoys what we do as well. That's great. It works out for everybody.
Yeah, it's entertaining. It's informative. I mean, it's just this beautiful kind of glory of a podcast that I look up to as an individual. So I guess I could sit here and throw compliments all day, but why don't we hop into that?
Let's just do that for, what do we got, an hour? Yeah keep them coming.
So we'll just rock and roll in these questions. I like to do a couple icebreaker questions for everyone listening. I know our listeners probably know you already, but I like to get to know you a little bit more as a person. So besides your own podcast, are there any others that you listen to? What are a couple of your favorites?
The two that I listen to from time to time, and to be really honest, I don't listen to podcasts. I just don't have a lot of time. Yeah. But in the draft season, I don't follow college sports hardly at all. I just don't have the time. So I'm playing catch up when it comes to scouting collegiate prospects, and that's when I listen to them. Josh Norris's podcast has always been one I listen to in the off season. Used to be Roto World. Now he's Underdog. Great off-season draft analyst. And then I got to give a shout-out to my boy J.J. Zacharyson, good friend of the show, his late-round QB pod. If I'm going to throw one on from time to time in season, it'll be his because it's short, quick, to the point, and I don't have a lot of time.
I feel you there. I mean, I can't imagine your schedule doing like 5 a week. Is that the number you're up to now with
5 main shows? We've got a Footcast, we've got our Spitballers comedy podcast, and we've got another, usually like Sirius XM radio last year. We got something else that I can't talk about yet coming up this year. So, 7-8 shows a week.
I mean, that's no small feat. I mean, I have 2, and I feel like I don't have time. I couldn't imagine.
You're my third show today, brother. Let's go.
He's rookie. Yeah, well, I understand when you say you don't have time for the podcast. I'm like, crap, I can't imagine doing 7, 2 a day, 3 a day. Holy cow. How did you get your start in the fantasy football industry? And then how did you get to where you're at now? I mean, the Footballers is listed by Forbes as for a fantasy football podcast. I mean, that in itself is an achievement. And how did you get from step 1 to, I would say, I don't know if you consider step 100 now, but maybe whatever you consider your current step, where you're at in life, how was that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's really one and the same. It's been a consistent staircase that we just stepped on step 1. I mean, how I got into the fantasy football industry was the Fantasy Footballers podcast. Andy, Mike, myself, eventually years and years back, we were players, we were fans, we were hobbyists, and we felt like we knew more than a lot of the analysts that we loved and respected and listened to, and so we're like, we could do this. And I think the special sauce for us is that from the get-go, our goal, and thankfully so far, knock on wood, our success has been in we want to provide something that is entertaining, that is fun, but actually knows what we're talking about, that is accurate, that helps you win your league, because that is also really fun. If you want to have fun, you want to actually listen to someone who knows what they're talking about and enjoy it, and then have a high-quality production show. So those are kind of the three pillars. Basically, I was not in the industry before we started the podcast, and that has risen to where now, as of this moment right now, o'clock, we are the #1 sports podcast on Apple and on Spotify of not fantasy football, but we're the #1 sports show. So we're very grateful for our audience and the listeners who have come along on the really fun ride over the last, better part of the decade.
How amazing is that to say? We are the #1 podcast, sports podcast.
It's wild, man. It is wild and crazy.
You need a shirt, like just right in the back, like a #1 phone right behind your ear.
I don't think so, man. Even just when I said it right now, like it feels good when I say it among friends. But I'll toot my own horn, but that still felt a little braggadocious. But the nice thing is, it's just the truth. It's just a fact. Like we are right now the #1 sports podcast. So it is cool to be in that spot, be in that position, and we're grateful and humbled to be there. We we recognize the great sports podcasts out there, and just happy to play a part.
I want to start calling you Ricky Bobby. I'm the best there's ever been.
That's right. If you ain't first, you're last.
Oh man, you just got to get a big old Ricky Bobby #1 in the back.
That's right. That's right. But watch out, because I'll say with all due respect, and then I'll give it to you.
Yeah, with all due respect, I'm #1. What is your greatest competitive edge versus other fantasy football players and colleagues?
Versus the average player is the fact that I get to do this full time for, the better part of a decade. So it's just the information overload and knowledge base has grown over time. If we're talking among peers and industry guys, where I think I've got an edge is probably rookie running back scouting. I've had a lot of success. I think, everyone makes their mistakes, but I think for the most part, I really trust myself. Like I scout all the positions. I don't necessarily love my quarterback rookie scouting. I don't know that I am an expert there. There's metrics and analysis and data that I'm confident in. But when it comes to film and watching and being like, I see this guy being great, there's just so much going on at the quarterback position. I don't feel confident. But at running back, I do feel confident. And then I would say mid-round wide receivers, I tend to have a good track record there as well.
And now when you say scouting, are you using YouTube? Are you actually going to games? Like,
no,
what is your process?
Yeah, my process is entirely YouTube. Well, depending on if you're talking college, it is YouTube. Otherwise, Game Pass. But it's when I'm speaking of scouting, I'm talking about film, notepad, paper, pen, videos, rewinding, grinding, that type of stuff.
So as the #1 podcast in the world, you probably have some polls. So what we need here, we need a platform to where, think of like NFL Rewind, but college tape, where you can log in, watch any college tape you want, take a look at, you could click any running back's name in college, click their name, go to their tape, be able to watch it. Like, I've been dreaming of this for years, and there's just, I don't know anything about it. Unless there is something, please tell me. But I've always just hounded through YouTube and grinded through film and found highlights or found game tape. But it would be so awesome to have a platform that has that all centrally located, like NFL Rewind.
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice. It's just not going to happen. And the truth is, for my purposes, YouTube has been enough. I mean, you can find at least, 7 or 8 games for every single scoutable NFL prospect, everybody that's invited to the combine, and you're not really going to watch more than that. And the window is so short. For fantasy football, you're scouting these people from combine to draft day, and then at that point, it's like, okay, all of that does not matter now. Now we've got that, we've established our opinions, and now we go forward with everything out of camp and then on the field stuff from then on forward.
Yeah, those are all great points as well. So outside your competitive, what would you consider your greatest weakness in fantasy football?
My greatest weakness in fantasy football, probably burnout or lack of. So, Andy, another guy from our show, he has
Don't know him.
Yeah, right. His transaction counter in fantasy football is terrifying. He just is nonstop. He'll make 20 transactions a day. I just don't have the time, we've got about the same time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the energy left to do that. So that's where I find I am left. And like on the waiver, I also have another weakness. Man alive, have I had not the best waiver wire gumption. Like whenever I really want a guy, all of my leagues is fab. That I play in for the vast majority of my leagues. And every time that I want a guy and I think I'm right on him, I never pay enough. Ever. I just lose out, and then I end up with leftover fab money. And I say every year, like, I'm going to learn my lesson. I'm going to go get this guy. And so then I think I am, but then someone else in the league is like, yeah, I'm just going to pay up and get him. So I constantly keep making that same mistake.
I think everyone can relate to not wanting to overpay in fab, because you do get times where you're in like playoffs and you really need like a player who is maybe a second, it's not second tier, but back up to the 1A, and they go down and it's playoff week and you're hoping to have that lightning in a bottle for playoffs. And so everyone's hoping and saving money on the fab at the end. I'm usually quite contrary. I'm blowing fab early, and I'm like, I got $1 left for my defense and throwing it out there. So, yeah, fab's tricky. I mean, people, it's a balance, and it's like a fine wine, right? You have to perfectly find that fine spot for it to be successful in every league.
And it's not something that an analyst, myself or anyone else, can solve for you, because it's an open market. It's you and the 12 in your league. Like, know the people you're playing against. It doesn't matter if I say, well, $25 will get a guy. If someone in your league is a crazy pants and he's willing to spend $55 on him, then you're not going to get him. So you've got to play the other 11 men and women in your league.
Crazy pants is a perfect definition. Last year, I remember some guy dropped 100 out of 100 on Andy Dalton after Dak Prescott went down. And I'm like,
brother.
I'm like, you have way more confidence than I do.
Quadruple flex league? I mean, that's a good buy in those quadruple flex leagues.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it was only super flex, but still, like, it's like, I have a lot more confidence in Andy Dalton than I do. So power to you, though, right? How would you describe your fantasy football philosophy?
My fantasy football philosophy is probably erring on the side of caution. More of I try to take, I hate to say less risk, because usually incorrectly risk is associated with high potential. But I think people, conflate those two ideas inappropriately. But I do try to take the safer, more known approach rather than just getting overwhelmed with hope and hype. Sometimes that might mean I do miss out on a player that does hit the hope and hype. But I feel like more often than not, my track record has been pretty successful with that, with, Jamar Chase right now. I mean, the hope, the hype. He's the next greatest thing of all time. He's going in the 5th round. And I'm like, I'll just, instead of hoping he becomes second half of the year like a Tyler Lockett, I'll just draft Tyler Lockett and have him from the beginning of the year. So the tried and true is fine with me.
And that's interesting, because you said that you like Dynasty as well. Most of the time you find Dynasty players are the opposite, where they're overreaching for rookies, right? And maybe not taking the proven vet as much. So I'm in the same boat as you. I typically go with the proven person over the rookie, especially in like confined leagues or tournaments or whatever it may be. But I do have my fair share of dynasty leagues. I do like to throw in rookies here, but I think that's probably one of my weaknesses as well. I'm a more of a got to see it first kind of guy than banking on the hype.
The biggest mistake that I see people make in dynasty leagues is overdoing age. Like, age is important. Don't hear what I'm not saying. You want to, monitor your roster, make sure you've got a future. But people get so crazy with the potential, the unrealized potential, and the youth and the age, that they never can build a roster that wins now. Like, you cannot win a championship ever in your league unless you can win right now. And so, in our last 5 years in our main dynasty league, Andy's got 2 championships, I've got 2 championships, and he employs that same philosophy of, if a guy's got a good 3-year window, that's great. Like, just go ahead and, win. If I'm going to stink for the next year or two or have to rebuild, I'm fine. I got my 2 championships. You can't take that from me.
Exactly. And you see it so much in Dynasty. People will, I'm gonna play for next year, and then next year I'm gonna play for next year. And it's next thing you know, it's 5 years later and they're still playing for next year. It's like, at one point you just got to burn it down or go for it. Like, you can't just keep playing for 1 year at a time. Like, I'm a firm believer in either burn it down and rebuild, or sell assets that young assets and get pieces that can play now and go for the championship. Couple last questions here before we dive into our Draft Sharks draft here. These are fill in the blank. So blank is the best fantasy football manager I have ever played against.
I would have to say Andy, because of his transaction limit. Like, Mike is fantastic. I'm fantastic, but we just can't keep up with. I don't know what happens when coffee gets in Andy, and he just, he'll make 700 trades in a week and change his roster a million times, and he will pay attention to, the reason I did this is because, I'm going to play against this guy in week 4 and this matchup. It's just like, dude, calm down.
Is he, how far in advance do you think he looks in? Is he looking 5-6 weeks in advance plus?
Years 5 or 6 years in advance. He's playing the long game. No, sometimes we all make mistakes. I mean, sometimes he makes a bunch of transactions, they don't work out. We don't know everything, but it's just the sheer amount of, like, we're all trying to be at 60% correct. Every bet we're making across the board, if we can be right 60% of the time, we're going to be better than the average. And I think we both are right 60+% of the time. The problem is, he's making 10 transactions to every 5 of mine. So if we're both at 60%, he's eking out slightly more wins. Yeah, based on sheer volume. We'll start calling him Andy Damas, right? Years and years in advance. Looking. And this question may be one of the same. Blank is my fantasy football nemesis, and I will do anything in my power to beat him, even if it means losing myself. Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm saying Andy is because, and this would probably shift to Mike, our main league, our league of record, the league that really sparked everything, the reason, like, the Fantasy Footballers podcast was originally a podcast just for our league mates. It was about our league.
That's awesome.
Where we were just talking about trades and matchups and just having fun, and then that's when it turned outward facing and became more advice and prognostication. But we are in the same division, so we play each other more than I play Mike. Andy and I are always battling for first in the division, and that's really annoying. So if Mike were in my division and Andy weren't, he would be my nemesis, but whoever I play the most, and that's Andy.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm going to pull up the board here. We'll dive into this Draft Sharks Invitational. So I'm going to get the screen share up here for everybody. So a couple questions with the board here is, I want to talk about position theory. Do you approach a draft differently from each spot that you're in? Do you just let the board fall to you, or do you have a certain strategy depending upon where you're drafting from? Like, you picked in the 1 hole, for instance, in this one. But would that philosophy change had you been like the 6 or the 7?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my philosophy changes where you are, and I think it should and it has to. Now, we have a phrase on our show, talking about staying water. We created that, not Bruce Lee. But stay water, just meaning let the draft come to you. Be willing to pivot. Be willing to change. That being said, you go in with a plan. If, obviously at the 101, I know I'm starting with Christian McCaffrey. So before I came into this draft, my plan was a modified 0 RB. The fact that, so the way that I viewed this league, because of all the positions and it's best ball, you can play different amount of positions, but the way I viewed it was a 2 quarterback, 2 running back, 4 wide receiver, one tight end league. And the reason I do that is because full PPR and with that amount of flex, usually that additional flex in a full PPR, it's going to be a wide receiver over a poor running back option. So in that, I thought, well, if I've got CMC to plug up one hole and then I can load up on wide receivers, I'm going to do that. That was my hope. It slightly changed throughout. I in the 7th round when Josh Jacobs was there, who represented a big tier break, I pulled the trigger and got that running back too. And unfortunately, I did not want to draft. When I was looking at this draft, my plan was Christian McCaffrey at the beginning, and then I hope I get a great wide receiver and a great quarterback at the 2-3 turn, being super flex. Unfortunately, DeAndre Hopkins was the last great wide receiver.
You're welcome.
One spot. Oh, that was you. I didn't even realize it was you. You son of a gun. I was so pissed at you. I
gotcha.
I did not pay any attention to who was drafting where. The only thing I noticed, me and Paulson were on the ends, but outside of that, everybody in between, I didn't realize who was doing what. But yes, Hopkins, that one really got me. That was probably – there were 2 times in this draft that I was pretty pissed off, and that was one of them. Thank you. Thank you, Billy.
You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. I'm glad I could be that guy. I love being that guy.
So because of that, I went George Kittle, tight end premium. My plan coming in, I wanted to punt tight end. I wanted to punt it. I love just grabbing 3 or 4 meandering tight ends at the end of a draft and having that extra roster spot somewhere else. But in a tight end premium, to get George Kittle at the 2-3 turn was unexpected.
So your misfortune of me selecting Hopkins resulted in my misfortune of Kittle not falling to me, though. So it went twofold there, because I said, hey, Hopkins is the last tier 1 wide receiver on my board. I really like Kittle, but I do like pushing tight end as well. Hey, if Kittle's there on the 3 hole, I'll take him back again. You took him. So we did snipe each other. I gladly took Hopkins, but I'm so happy to hear that I sniped you.
yeah, that's well, great. I loved your. Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Hopkins, and Ryan Tannehill. I can honestly say, based on the players available at each one of your picks, I would have had that identical draft. That would have been my draft if I was on the clock when you were on the clock. So I approve.
And then it went downhill. No.
I don't know. I have not looked at the rest of your roster in depth, but probably.
Like, 1 through 3 I approve. Like 4 through 25.
That's when the wheels fell off.
Yeah, it was a very competitive draft, and we had a lot of big names in here, a lot of big drafters. I mean, a lot of high stakes FFPC guys in this as well. So it was definitely a competitive room. Hats off to Draft Sharks though for creating one of the most unique formats that I have physically drafted in. I mean, very rarely can you say, hey, look at round 1, and I saw 3 running backs go. I saw, what is that, 6 quarterbacks go. I saw 2 tight ends go, and I saw a wide receiver go. And I mean, if it's super flex, it's painted red, right? If it's not super flex, it's painted yellow, or I guess in this scenario, it's painted blue and green. And so the format itself was unique. It created a lot of opportunity for individuals to get creative and to kind of go outside the spectrum and to create this unique build. Which is where I found myself. Like I got behind on the 8 ball in quarterback. I mean, I don't want Jared Goff on my roster, but I start looking around and say, hey, if I don't take Jared Goff, I'm going to end up with, but I'm going to end up with Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm going to end up with a Tyler Heineke. I'm going to end up with a Andy Dalton. And, and I love Jimmy Garoppolo, but I don't expect him to play the full, 17 games this season. And then in best ball, you're trying to find somebody. So like I never liked taking 3 quarterbacks in the first 8 rounds, and even in a super flex league. But the way that the quarterbacks went off the board, it forced me to kind of push somebody up. I would have loved to push that position back, but just couldn't here in this draft.
Yeah, I get it.
Let's talk about player selection. How do you approach each draft? What's the prep work you're looking at for each room you're joining? I know you build your own projections, so Are you drafting purely off your projections, or how are you using them on each draft?
I love my projections. They are fantastic and great. But what's ironic is when I did this draft, I used mine, Andy's, and Mike's consensus projections more than just my own. That's the Ultimate Draft Kit. I pulled up the Ultimate Draft Kit on my iPad, and I marked players drafted, and I just went basically with our projections, plugging in, obviously, this scoring format, the uniqueness of the tight end premium and full PPR and super flex, all that jazz. And then I would go down, and I had, an idea of what I wanted to do roster construction wise, which was hopefully load up on some stud wide receivers in this league while, again, my hope was to punt my second quarterback and punt my tight end. Unfortunately, both of those things kind of went off script for me because, like we said, I ended up having to go George Kittle because I felt like he was just too much of a difference maker once I was at the second tier of wide receiver. And then my second running back, and really even more so my third running back, those got away from me a little bit because I gambled, and I think I came away okay. I like my team, and certainly if Jameis Winston is the starter, then I'm great. But he might be a burned pick if Taysom Hill is the starter. What happened for me was I was rolling the dice, and based on the draft that happened the night before ours, I kind of had theirs pulled up to use that as a little bit of average draft position, see where people were drafting guys. Yeah. Both Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill went much later than where they did in our draft. And, when I was at the 10-11 turn, my original plan was to draft both. I was going to take Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston because that just guarantees I've got the Saints starter, and I'm getting him in double-digit rounds. Unfortunately, Taysom went, and I've got to play with fire and just hope it's Jameis.
Yeah, and I think the Michael Thomas news didn't help that scenario. I think all of us expected it to be Jameis prior to Michael Thomas, and then once we found out Michael Thomas was going to miss some time, I adjusted my projections because I think they need that dynamic aspect that Hill has on the ground. It just adds another element to the offense that they need. I've seen that a lot, actually, especially in best ball, where people just double tap those two, and I think it's a good philosophy, especially when it's at not zero cost, but at minimal cost, that you're able to secure that position. Because if one of them is announced to starter tomorrow, I mean, they're going in the range of like Burrow, Tua, I think, all in that area, because there's always that lingering thought that the other one could come in and take over, or maybe sprinkled in, or whatever it may be. But I do like the philosophy of taking them both. Unfortunately, it didn't play out that way for you, but I do like the philosophy. And that's also another, like, drafting on the tips. It has that disadvantage of runs or things like that throw it off. So are you a value-based drafter in general, or do you believe in just getting your guy? Like, you're on the board and you see someone's falling around, but your guy is there. Which way do you typically lean?
So I'm in a unique position because I'm making my own, I stat everybody out. My projections are my beliefs, and that's what I'm using to do the draft. They kind of end up being one and the same. I see myself as a value-based drafter, but the value ends up being my guys because I have so-and-so ranked a lot higher, and when they drop to a good value, I take them. I think it does depend, though, on where you are in the draft, right? Like, if you are at the turn, which I was in this draft, you have to be a little bit more of a grab my guy player because ADP usually goes out the window. You're 24 picks away from someone else. You're not in the middle of a round or near a turn where you can say, okay, this guy will probably get back to me. You just have to assume no one's getting back to you at that point. So when you're on the clock, if you know I want this guy, I'm not sure if he's going to get back to you, take that guy.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'll wait, and if I like the guy, and I'm taking him, especially on the tips. I think in the middle you can take those chances more, but on the tips, no way. Like, they're consider him gone, like you said. Do you believe in stacking, and if so, why?
I do believe in stacking. I believe in stacking in both both best ball and redraft. I know best ball, it's become pretty much this standardized, proven winning strategy. That's the reason I went after Mike Evans, where I got him. He's in a tier with other guys for me, but I had Brady, and I wanted that stack. Great touchdown in a best ball, especially. You're going to, and this is slightly different here because it is 2 quarterback. But in a if you're playing underdog or whatever, where it's best ball and you've got 1 quarterback, stacking your quarterbacks, both of them, will be really nice because one of them's going to get in, and when they have a good game, presumably so will their main other weapon or even an ancillary weapon, and then they will score together, double your points, and get on the scoreboard for that week. So I think in a best ball format, I prefer stacking. And like I said, even in a redraft league, I talked about earlier, I am more risk adverse, and you could argue that stacking is a risky proposition because it's very boom bust. But boom bust doesn't necessarily mean risk. I want to not finish in 3rd place in my league. I mean, that 3rd place is really good. You were a good team. You were 1 game out of the championship. You got almost all the way there. Maybe if you got in that championship, you can look at the score and say, "Oh man, I would have won." But I don't want. I want to win. I want to get first. You look at Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs this last year. If you had them together as that stack, when they go nuclear in those playoff weeks, is like really high win percentage.
Yeah, very hard to beat those type of stacks, and I mean, when they do have down weeks, it's detrimental to your team. But that's why we're not stacking bad teams. We're not out here stacking, Detroit. We're not out here stacking Houston. We're out here stacking like the Chiefs, and we're out here stacking the Bills, and we're out here stacking other high-powered offensive teams. I also believe in stacking. That's why for me, like pick 12 for me, like I almost like timed out because I wanted the stack with like the Hopkins and Connor stack there for Arizona. I again, the high-powered offense, but for me in my rankings, I had Harris, above Connor. So I said, hey, I don't like to drop a tier when I look at stacking. I'll say, hey, I will take the stack if it makes sense for my roster construction. I will take the stack if it makes sense for my team, but I'm never going to drop a tier when I do that. And although I wanted to in this scenario, I didn't, and I stayed true to my philosophy.
So why did you drop a tier down to Harris instead of taking James Conner, who should be a tier above anyways?
Touche. I loved the way I loved the way that Harris looked down the stretch. I think that this is the first time in that I can remember that we have had a clear-cut role separation inside this Pats offense. I mean, we finally have Harris here on 1 and 2 downs. Yes, Sony will spell in occasionally, I believe, but this is the first time that White now has had the passing role with Burkhead gone in quite some time. So I feel like this year we're going to have some defined roles. maybe I'm falling for the trap here for the hoodie. Hoodie's got me underneath them. And he's ready to just capture my soul again. But I did stay true to my rankings here. I did take Harris, but it was definitely the yin and yang on each shoulder in here. No, take Connor, take Harris, take Connor, take Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now that the other 2 guys on the show would have been with you. They also believe in Damian Harris. I love Damian Harris. I love the talent. I'm a little lower on him just because if Cam gets the rushing touchdowns, James White gets all the passes, I don't need a guy between the 20s just running great. That's Evan Singletary, and I'm not about that life. But hopefully it doesn't work out for you because I took James Conner with the next pick. So hopefully it works out for me.
Hopefully we get Mac Jones sooner rather than later, and then we don't have to worry about the vulturing of the goal line.
That's fair.
That's my like wish, but I do think Cam has that role at least to begin with.
Get to see Cam and Mac tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. Like my daughter, like she sings the anthem, like I call it the anthem. It's like the national football anthem, right? The da 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 da. Like she wakes up on Sunday now. She's like, "Is it football Sunday, Dad?" I'm like, "Yes, it is. We no longer have any more weekends now without football."
That's awesome.
How much does the bye week sway your decision while drafting? Do you stray away from like week playoff bye teams?
No, it does not sway my drafting. Hardly at all. Obviously, in a best ball, you have to look at the bye week when it comes to, your onesie positions, the positions you're not going to have much of. If you only draft 2 tight ends and they both have a week 9 bye, that's going to be a problem because you will score 0 points. So when I'm looking at, quarterback, tight end, that's when I will look at it. But usually I don't care too much about the bye weeks.
Okay. And what's your ideal roster construction in a best ball draft? And this was abnormal. I think we're 25 here. Like, let's focus for the general public then and like 18 rounders for like underdog or FFPC,
sure.
whatever.
Yeah,
it may be.
I mean, usually when I'm looking at it, I want 2 or 3 quarterbacks and 2 or 3 tight ends. Okay, and that will be dependent upon. I don't want 3 and 3. If I end up with 3 tight ends, or if I take an early tight end, if I draft Travis Kelce, then I'll probably only have 2 tight ends on the roster, in which case maybe I'll take more shots late at quarterback. So those are kind of, to use your word you just used, they're kind of a yin-yang position to me, where I'm not going to go early on both. I'm not going to go too late on both, because I don't want to end up with 6 of those. And then I like to have a couple of stud running backs. Like, I really do prefer to have some bell cow running backs so that I can load up on wide receivers. I want to have more wide receivers personally than the other positions. Wide receivers are not consistent. Even the greats. The great ones are not consistent. You look at, we've got a consistency metric at the Fantasy Footballers, and you look at a guy at wide receiver and you go, oh, he's an A. He's like one of the most consistent wide receivers. And then you go look at his game log and you're like, wow, he had a lot of busts. Yeah. I mean, unless you're Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill this year. I mean, Tyreek Hill in 2019, when he was the number 1 wide receiver, was extremely inconsistent, busted all the time. And so I want more shots at getting the wide receivers that hit that week into my lineup. So I like to plug my roster at running back with a couple of studs and not overdraft the number of running backs, just hope for health, basically, and load up on wide receivers. That's usually my approach.
Yeah, I'm very similar to you. I'm typically a 2 quarterback guy unless I get somebody like Darnold as my number 1, right? And then I'm taking 3 definitely in that scenario. If I push too far back, again, I don't like to push both, but I will. I'm traditionally more of a like a 2, 4, 8 or 9, 2/3 kind of build. So the 2 quarterbacks, 4 or 5 running backs, 8 to 9 wide receivers, and 2 or 3 tight ends, depending upon how the board falls and who lands your way. I do like to go hyper fragile, is what I guess the terminology is now with it, because I agree, wide receivers are very inconsistent. I mean, you look at Tyreek Hill, for example, who will have 2 touchdowns and 150 yards with like 10 catches, and then he'll have the following week will be like 5 for 60 and no touchdowns. And that's not the points that you expect out of your number 1 wide receiver on a week-to-week basis, but it happens. It's football. It's reality. And so I agree. You do need to throw in and load up on wide receiver in order to offset those losses on a week-to-week.
Yeah, it's always funny to look back at best ball lineups and see some of the combinations of players that were unfathomably good together and realize how much luck is involved, because it's like, wait, these 2 guys weren't that great. Oh, it just so happened that they took turns on certain weeks scoring well and sucking. And if you paired a bunch of guys that were great on the same weeks and bad on the same weeks, you got no shot at winning the league because you just didn't score in half of your weeks. And that is pure unadulterated luck. And so I want more shots at that in the wide receiver where it is less consistent.
So speaking of shots, not on our show sheet here, but give me the name of like 3 of your favorite late round wide receiver shots. Let's focus on like rounds 12 through 18.
12 through 18. I will start before 12, regardless of what you say, because it wouldn't be me this year if I didn't mention Robbie Anderson as one of my favorite lateish round guys. Let me pull up some ADP here. Russell Gage is someone I think that is just a value. I don't think he's going to have some outstanding season, but he's wide receiver 58. If Matt Ryan's not done, he's going to have a lot of work. Traquan Smith, I know it's a gross name. I know it. I was doing I'm working on a metric called True Score that I did not roll out this year. I wanted a year of proof in the pudding, and part of the reason I didn't roll it out this year was because My true score metric really liked Traquan Smith, and I was like, man, this might be bad. This metric might suck. So, but it'll be a real feather in the cap if Traquan comes out and shows that he's actually a good wide receiver.
He's not.
I like right. No, yeah. I mean, look, I could be wrong, but I'm willing to take a shot based on some metrics I've been looking at. Later on, I like Van Jefferson. I think has an opportunity. Josh Reynolds was very involved with Cam Akers gone, Matthew Stafford in, Gerald Everett gone. I think there's more opportunity for a third wide receiver there than we realize. How quickly we forget Brandon Cooks being an involved third wide receiver in that system with a quarterback upgrade. So he's a name that I would throw out there. Who are some of your favorite late round wide receiver targets?
So I'm going to be devil's advocate here, and contrarian to Traquan Smith, I'm going to say Callaway. I like his tape. I liked what he did. We've seen Traquan Smith come in. It's kind of like we know what he is at this point. Like he's only had like 80 catches in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I just don't think that like this is the year that's going to happen. I just don't see it happening. Where I could see.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, right? The later career breakouts are very, very rare. I completely get it, and we know that there will be someone catching passes and doing work in that offense because it's an NFL offense, and it's Sean Payton. So you want to take a shot, and if you want to take a shot on Callaway, that makes complete sense. The one thing I would say though is Traquan is a speed guy, a down the field guy, and look, Breeze has not been the right pair for him. Over the last couple of years to utilize those skills.
Fair enough. And I like Bryan Edwards as well. So I take a look at this Raiders offense and say, hey, they need that true X receiver. I think Bryan Edwards can be the guy. I don't know what's happening right now with Darren Waller. He's missed the last 9 days of practice. Is it contract related? Doesn't seem to be injury related. We don't know, but I still think Bryan Edwards with or without Darren Waller has a chance to take a major step forward in this offense. And
word on the lowdown, and this is not confirmed, but there's speculation that it's probably an ankle and that it's not that serious for Waller. That's what we saw from people working out with him. But certainly Bryan Edwards is hysterical to me. I mean, absolutely hysterical. You want to talk about winning training camp. Oh man, Bryan Edwards is training camp master. Who is he? Randy Moss and Terrell Owens, those are his comps given this training camp. It's so weird to me because he played most of the last season. I thought he just missed the whole season. Like he was injured and we didn't get to see him after all that hype because he was gone. But it's like you watch his camp videos and it's like, dude just skies up and grabs this ball like he's in full beast mode and looks great. So why did he not work on the field last year? It just I can't get my brain to make sense of it.
The only thing I could think is maybe he wasn't mentally prepared. He has the skill set. I mean, we see it. It's just maybe he wasn't mentally ready for the NFL. But this year,
all aboard!
I am ready for Edwards. He's one of my most owned wide receivers right now in FFPC drafts. Since you broke my round 12 rule, I'll break my own round 12 rule. And Deebo Samuel for me. I loved earlier in drafts. He was going to rounds 9, 10. He's sneaking up into 7, 8 now. But arguably to me, has a chance to be the number one of this offense. I know a lot of people are going to be upset hearing that, all you Brandon Ayuk truthers out there. But I mean, we have to remember.
Guilty as charged.
We have to remember Ayuk had the season he had because of injuries. Deebo wasn't on the field. Kittle wasn't on the field. And I'm not taking away from what Ayuk did. I mean, look at the back. I mean, I have a little bit of red and gold back here. I love this 49ers team. And I think Brandon Ayuk is a special talent. I just think that with all three on the field, I think it's going to be very hard for him to replicate and to pay off ADP at that price point, where I would gladly take the discount with Deebo Samuel, who's going two rounds later in most drafts than Brandon Ayuk. And I think potentially could have more production in this offense.
I'm just confused because you said with all three of them on the field, but he would have to be on the field for them to be all three there, and that's gonna be real tough for Deebo. No, I mean you're right in the sense that if Debo has the talent to be the one, without a doubt, without a shred of doubt. Like, Debo can come in and dominate.
I mean, his name's Debo. It's like, snatch your chain. I just got the ball. I'm down the field. Like, his yard after the catch monster. Like, I love him.
Yeah, I mean, I just went on the Fantasy Pros podcast yesterday. He was on my all-bust team, so we disagree there. But I can see the avenue. I mean, it's just his depth of target so close to the line of scrimmage. He's coming up against
-5 yards at one point.
He's coming up against a year 2 wide receiver breakout in year 1, Brandon Ayuk, and we just did a study about if you have a tight end that is one of the top targets, you cannot support a second wide receiver. Like, even Patrick Mahomes, when he's got Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce taking those targets, like, the greatest offense, we've seen in recent memory, Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman, they're all irrelevant because there's just really not enough to go around. So he could be the 2, and Brandon Ayuk could go away, but I just don't think both can exist, not in that passing offense. And so I'm going to take the shot on Ayuk.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to throw more in order for any of these 3 to coexist together. I mean, we can't have those 17, 18, 19 pass attempt games. We need to get back to the 35, 37 attempt games that we saw when they went to the Super Bowl versus Kansas City in order for this offense to support all 3. Can it happen? Yes. Is Jimmy Garoppolo the one? Couldn't be. But I think it's just a matter of them actually committing to the passing game this year.
Yeah, and since we're here and breaking rules, I want to throw Mike Williams out into the mix as well.
Ooh, I like
because
Mike
he
well.
is someone that is, relative to what he has done on the field, what his capital is, and what his opportunity is, he's left for dead. People don't believe in Mike Williams in the slightest, and he is the clear-cut wide receiver, too, for Justin Herbert, who could throw for,
5,000 yards.
He could throw for 5,040. I mean, that's in his range of outcomes. If he does that, and Hunter Henry's gone, and Keenan Allen's not a touchdown scorer, like, Mike Williams could just be an absolute dominating wide receiver this year. He's had double-digit seasons. He's had 1,000-yard seasons. It's just he's kind of disappointed lately, and I get it. He has. He's been injured, and he's been super uninspiring for fantasy. I mean, you could say, well, Justin Herbert broke out last year, and Mike Williams didn't do anything. I agree with you, but that doesn't mean he can't. And Hunter Henry is out of the way, so he's another guy I like to target.
Well, and to your point too, they have a new system. They have Joe Lombardi in here who favors the X role receiver, with that Saints attack. So we have a favored X receiver with Mike Will, and Lombardi's there to help him flourish. Interesting to see. I heard news today about a hip issue. I want to see how serious that is. But
with Mike Williams,
yes, yeah. Today I heard.
I have not seen that. This is very upsetting.
Devastating. I saw it too. I own a lot of Mike Will, so I'm like, oh, hopefully it's just precaution or just camp blurbs just to talk about. But it was I own a lot of Mike Will. I love him. I like the X spot with Lombardi, and I love Justin Herbert. I mean, he's phenomenal. He's my number 5 quarterback on the season for 2021. So I completely agree with Mike Will. My last one here for receivers is going to be Terrace Marshall, and I love Terrace Marshall. I mean, I know you like Robbie Anderson. I think that they can exist. I think this offense is going to be better than people expect. The defense is just bad enough as well to where they're going to have to throw and keep up with games. And I think that this man is just an animal. I mean, like what he did at LSU his rookie year, step in and to be that guy from his rookie season and to be that dominant. I mean, I know he had some injury concerns coming to the NFL, but I mean, he's out here in camp just making silly plays. And I just think that he could take a big step forward here, year 1 with the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually say this in public for fear of being attacked and mocked and beaten down. But when I scouted this great college football team, Jamar Chase was my wide receiver 3 on that team. I preferred Justin Jefferson, and I thought Terrace Marshall was better. Terrace Marshall was a thing of beauty, and this Carolina offense is going to wreck me this year. It is going to destroy me. Here's why. I love Robbie Anderson. I love Terrace Marshall. I really like DJ Moore. Christian McCaffrey's fantastic. But Sam Darnold, he's going to ruin everything for me. He's going to ruin it all. And so I just have to hope that once you get the stink of Adam Gase away, that, this quarterback who is younger than Joe Burrow can flourish post Gase the way that Ryan Tannehill did, because he's going to have to make these guys actually valuable. All of my hope and dreams and love, it's really tough that it's tied to Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold has objectively sucked as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, he's been really bad. It's, how much of it's the Jets, how much of it was Adam Gase, how much of it was Darnold. It's all to be seen. And this is the year we're going to find out, I believe. But let's just say you wake up tomorrow, 2021 season's over. Sam Darnold's a top 15, top 12 quarterback. Are you surprised with the supporting cast?
I am not surprised. He's he's someone that I am not projecting that. Like, I don't think that is the highest probable outcome. I had him about a week ago. I was tweaking some of my stats. He got up to quarterback 16, so he's not super far from that from me. But I can see an outcome with this offense and with those weapons and without Adam Gase where, I would not be shocked. You set the bar at what seemed high, but for me, like, if he ends up having some super unexpected, quarterback 10 finish, I won't be shocked. But I certainly would not go to Vegas, and I would not bet on that. Because I haven't seen anything from him. It's everything around him that's so perfect. Like, if he can't succeed this year, then he just needs to get kicked out of the league. Yeah. You're not going to succeed anywhere if you can't succeed with this cast.
Yeah, Christian McCaffrey, Terrace Marshall, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, it's you if you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I fully agree. But did you watch the video when he walked into his new house knowing that he was gone? He was like, released out of Adam Gase's presence. He was. I mean, I was happy for him. People forget he was going ahead of Josh Allen. I mean, he was drafted ahead of Josh Allen, and to have that type of expectations to where we're at now, it's such a disappointment in his career.
He's a little bitty baby boy too, and that's something we can't forget. Like, I think when Carolina traded for him, even though they had the number 8, they could have taken Justin Fields. They could have gone that route. When they looked at the film and they said, okay, what's the prospect we want to bring in here as a rookie? They probably said, look, if Sam Darnold was in the draft, he's younger than Joe Burrow. So
yeah, if
he were a rookie right now, with all the experience he's already had in the NFL, we can grow and develop this player into a legitimate franchise quarterback. That's their belief, and I hope they are right. I don't think they are. I don't think he's gonna be a franchise quarterback, but man, do I hope they're right.
So, Dynasty, are you buying or are you selling?
Oh, I'd buy Sam Darnold because he's 25 cents on the dollar. I mean, what I have to trade to get Sam Darnold is probably meaningless and worthless, and I could pretty much almost cut that, or it's a draft pick that has a 25% chance of hitting because it's so late. And the upside, if Sam Darnold does hit, he's super young and would be tied to a very good offense. So I'm fine to buy Sam Darnold in a dynasty.
I've been telling people who, I'll get questions from our listeners and they say, hey, should I trade wide receiver A, B, and C for Justin Herbert? I'm like, probably takes away your win now mode. I would personally just go after somebody like Sam Darnold, or go after somebody who's going to cost you pennies on the dollar, just like you said.
Go after Tom Brady. Nobody. Yeah. I mean, he's 44, so he's always. I've been saying this for the last 3 years.
7 years.
Yes, I mean it's he's in his 40s. People don't. He's an expiring asset in everybody's mind in Dynasty, but he's going to be great. And he's going to be great this year, and he's going to be great next year. So it's
the year is 2044. Tom Brady is still on Dynasty trade blocks.
Just go get him. He's not that pricey.
Bye. Right? Get him on your roster. Easy fill and plug and play for a year or two. Well, Jason, I just want to say thank you for joining us here on the Fantasy Football Fanalist stream presented by Fantasy Data. It was an honor and a privilege to have you on. Again, I really look at you guys as the gold standard in podcasting, and anything that I do or that I have tried to become in a podcast world, you guys have been that standard for me. So I just want to say thank you. I truly enjoyed the time, and I'm very grateful for you joining the podcast.
I appreciate the words, very kind, and thank you for having me on.
Well, I mean, why don't you give people the plugs? Most people know who you are, but let everyone know where to find you, Twitter, the whole shebang.
Yeah, I mean, you can find everything we do at the Fantasy Footballers. Right now, we're pouring every ounce of ourselves into the draft kit, ultimatedraftkit.com. That's, the proven tool. That's what I use personally. That's what the Foot Clan uses, and it's been proven to build a great foundation for fantasy championships. So that's what I would point towards is the Ultimate Draft Kit.
Awesome. Well, everybody, make sure to follow Jason on Twitter if you do not, and the Fantasy Footballers. You know where to find his stuff. Thanks again for joining us. We will actually, Bradley and I will be live. We're going to be at the FF Expo this weekend. We're going to be recording in front of the Brown Stadium, reviewing our Browns projections for 2021. They wouldn't let us in. They're like, no, you're a Niner fan. You can't come in. But no, due to COVID restrictions, we are unable to enter the facility, we were told. But we are going to be recording on the outside and doing our projections. So we will be live tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 Eastern, for the stream. Actually, that might have to change. I don't know how dark it is my first time over there. So we'll see how dark it is. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you live tomorrow. Have a good night.